The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, welcome everyone to the December 2018, almost 2019, December 2018 HR Best Practices webinar series. My name is Kevin Mosher. I'm a labor and employment specialist attorney by the Minnesota State Bar Association and partner in the Thompson Co. Minnesota office. And I'm really excited because I've been waiting years to use the use all my Seinfeld knowledge to present on Festivus and religious discrimination accommodations in the workplace. And I, just absolutely love the Festivus episode for Seinfeld. So I'm particularly excited to speak on this topic today and how it intersects with HR. And hopefully all of you have seen the Seinfeld Festivus episode. If you haven't, it's it's something definitely worth watching if you have time. For those of you who have not participated in the webinar series or partaken, welcome. It is being recorded, so if you are interested, you can go to the myHRgenius website at myHRgenius, or thehrgenius.com. And you can watch these and any of the other previous webinars that we've done over the many years that we've been doing this. Again, if you're new or if you didn't remember, you're welcome to type in questions in the box on here, and I will try to get to them as we have time during the presentation. But I won't be able to, we're not open phone lines or anything. This is just a one-way webinar. If you need HRCI or SHRM or certain CLE credits, hopefully you check the box that indicated that you needed those. And once we verify attendance, we will send those certificates out to all of you. So once again, very excited to present this month on religious discrimination, harassment, accommodations, that sort of thing in the workplace. And I've even got some really good examples. So there's your Festivus poll. So if you haven't seen the Seinfeld episode, again, I think it's like a 2 or 3 minute YouTube video. It's funny. I think it's funny. So that is the Festivus poll. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the laws as we normally do with these presentations. And by the way, I should have said this at the beginning. We just finalized our 2019 webinar series. So those will be going out, and they'll be on the website. And I encourage all of you to attend and register. I think we have some really great topics, focusing a lot, not just today on accommodations and discrimination in the workplace, but doing a lot more with FMLA than we normally do. With the webinar series, so doing some primers on FMLA and various accommodations in the workplace next year. Okay, so we're going to talk about the law today. We're going to talk about religion. We're going to talk about accommodations. Religious accommodations are similar to disability accommodations, but there are some key differences, just like there are key differences in the protected status itself. But so we'll talk about those. So if you're, many of you are, as HR professionals, are very familiar with disability accommodations, and that's fantastic. That knowledge will help you if you're not as familiar with religious accommodations. We'll talk about discrimination. We'll talk about a little bit about retaliation. So various protected statuses and issues. And then we'll talk about investigations and examples. We have a lot of examples today. So I think this one, I will just say, I find accommodations generally to be difficult. And I think they're difficult for HR people, and I think they're really, really difficult for managers that really shouldn't get too involved unless they have some sort of HR expertise. But when we talk about religion and we talk about disability, it's sometimes so hard to know. It's hard to know, with religion, we look at whether or not somebody has a sincerely held religious belief. We want to look at, how they practice. And it's hard not to make judgments sometimes on that. And it's even hard to not to make judgments on disabled individuals. Sometimes we feel like the individuals, rightly or wrongly, are malingering. Sometimes we feel like they've hurt themselves maybe in the workplace and they're bringing this on. Maybe they're making their request for an accommodation. It's just suspect. Same with religion. Sometimes it's like, well, I just got, we declined you from not working on, saying that you have to work on Sunday for whatever reason. It's part and parcel of the job. And now you, suddenly are religious, and after never having espoused any sort of religious belief before, suddenly you're religious and can't work on Sundays. It's sometimes hard to judge, and ultimately we in HR are the judges of the sincerity of the person's religious beliefs. Sometimes we are held to be the judge, trying to judge the sincerity of somebody's disability as well. With disability, it's a little different because we can ask for medical documentation, and really HR people should never try to play doctor. So if a medical professional says that the person's disabled or indicates that they seem to meet the definition of a disability under federal law, then we should probably just go with that. But religion, that's hard, right? You're probably not going to call the rabbi or the priest or somebody else in a position of religious authority to make that call. So we're not going to get some sort of note like we might get a medical certification or some sort of doctor's note. We're not going to get that from a religious organization. And so a lot of times we are called to try to figure this out. Does it seem to be sincerely held? That's what Title VII would require. It doesn't have to be an organizational religion. It doesn't have to be something that we've heard of before. It just has to be something that's a sincerely held religious type belief. And it doesn't even have to be religious. It could be non-theistic. It could be theistic, obviously. Belief in God, sorry. Or non-belief in God. It could be spiritual. It could be a number of things. It could be a practice that somebody has that looks like a religious belief. So with religion, we'll get into this a little bit more in the next few slides, but it's harder. And so, I always feel, and I'm a super HR apologist, right? Anyway, but I always feel like HR, it's really hard to advise managers who, of course don't want to, they just want the work to get done. Right. And so I do sometimes feel like HR professionals are put into a difficult position here, with religion and trying to accommodate religion in the workplace. But the key here, from this slide to understand is that religious discrimination, religion is protected. So whereas somebody, a lot of times people think that they have some sort of First Amendment right to express themselves everywhere in the world, and it's just not true. First Amendment only applies to public land. So if you're a private employer, that's your private property, assuming that you have property and employees working in, not everybody's remote. So that is your property. You actually get to determine what people say and do. It's private property. The First Amendment doesn't apply. If somebody wants to express their belief that the Vikings are really, really, really terrible, and you don't like that because you think the Vikings are really, 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 really awesome, then you could fire them for that. But for expressing that belief or getting in a great debate over it with some Chicago Bears fan. So, but First Amendment, there's no First Amendment right to that. And it's the same with religion. There is no First Amendment right to religion and expression of religion. However, there are laws that protect employees from expressing themselves in the workplace with regard to religion, and not discriminating against them and not harassing them. So whereas the person doesn't have an absolute right to express themselves, what they do have is a right not to be discriminated against or retaliated against or harassed because of their religious beliefs. One other thing that with regard to religion that we have to do is we have to accommodate. And we'll spend a lot of time today talking about what accommodations look like. Okay, so still relevant today. The workplace is changing. There's a lot more diversity. One of the reasons that we're talking about this now in 2018 and we weren't talking about it as much several years ago is because there has been a major push by the federal government, in particular the EOC, that has, I don't want to say made it a top priority, but it's a much greater priority than it used to, which is to investigate religious discrimination and harassment and retaliation and failure to accommodate in the workplace. The American workforce and many parts of this country are becoming more and more diverse, particularly with regard to religion. And so there is an increasing amount of understanding that employers have responsibilities when it comes to accommodating religious beliefs. And so as a result, there's been a lot more pushback and difficulty in understanding that from employers. And there have been more EEOC lawsuits and charges of discrimination, retaliation, harassment for religion filed through the EEOC, and the numbers have been going up quite a bit. And there have been a lot of high-profile settlements, including a high-profile case from 2015 against Abercrombie and Fitch, where Abercrombie and Fitch refused to hire a teenage girl for wearing a hijab. And because, for those of you who don't know Abercrombie and Fitch, it's, like, I don't know what you would call it, but it's like Ivy League, fraternity type clothing, or at least historically, right? So Abercrombie had a look, and in fact, they had a thing called a look policy, and a teenage girl wearing a hijab did not fit the look policy, and so she wasn't given the job. Well, that they didn't even try to talk to her about this and tell her about it and try to accommodate her. So since that case came out in 2015, obviously went against Abercrombie. Since that case came out in 2015, there's been a lot more knowledge and there's been a lot more understanding out there in the workplace about especially grooming and clothing policies, but just generally religion in the workplace. And the EOC has continued to have more and more cases and charges along these lines, with a lot of settlements with Walmart, Abercrombie, obviously, and a number of others. There have been some really high profile ones here in Minnesota in particular, because of the number of employees who are Muslim in the workplace, particularly in outstate Minnesota, where it's just a little bit different, and maybe the employers didn't understand all of the requirements that needed to be done with accommodating. So there's been a lot more. It's been a lot more high profile. It's not been like Me Too or anything like that, not that high profile, but it's been much more high profile. And we've seen an increase over the years. And I think we'll continue to see an increase because of the increasing diversification of the U.S. workforce throughout the United States, in most of the United States anyway. Okay. So laws. So we have these three. We've got three. There's actually, so three is twice, which is funny. So anyway, the main one that we want to look at here is Title VII. So we've got the First Amendment. It doesn't really apply in the workplace, just like it doesn't apply on the internet. And then but the main one that we have is Title VII. So Title VII is when we're talking about the EOC and we're talking about the EOC, bringing charges and lawsuits by the EOC against employers, we're really talking about Title VII. So what does it do? It prohibits discrimination on the basis of religious belief. And again, it doesn't have to be, it has to just be sincerely held. It doesn't have to be theistic. It could be non-theistic as well. It could be something, some sort of, something that somebody believes. It doesn't even have to be widely recognized. It could have just like one person or two people that actually believe this. That could be a religion protected by Title VII. It doesn't have to be Christianity or something that is widely understood. It prohibits job segregation. You cannot put people in certain jobs or certain locations or try to group them together with other people of similar religious beliefs under Title VII. You have to treat everybody on their skills, on their qualifications, on the job that they do. You can't try to segregate people. Keep all the Christians in one side, keep all the Muslims in another, all the Jews in another side. That's prohibited by Title VII. It also prohibits harassment. And so this is very similar to race. It's very similar to disability. It's very similar to gender. All these sorts of anti-discrimination laws. But so there is harassment that is very similar to what we see with sexual harassment. Now, oftentimes, when I do a lot of sexual harassment training and webinars, and I often say, like, yes, sexual harassment, the whole Me Too stuff, that's the most commonly understood form of harassment. But harassment really applies to all protected categories under Title VII, including religion. And so It's not just an employer discriminating potentially against somebody because of their religious beliefs, but it also prohibits coworker harassment of employees because of their religious beliefs. It's unlawful if the employer knows about it and doesn't do anything. So where you have a reporting mechanism for reporting sex harassment, that policy, take a look at your policy, make absolutely sure that your harassment policy and your reporting mechanism and your examples and what you talk about, that it's not just limited to sex harassment. It needs to also be expanded to religion as well, religious harassment. It needs to be expanded to racial harassment. So anything covered under Title VII, any of these protected classes should be included in your harassment policy with the reporting mechanisms and all that. So there are exceptions, similar to what we see with under the ADA with disabilities. There are exceptions where if the employee's requested accommodation would pose an undue hardship on the employer, on the business, then if it's, and you have to prove it, like if you're asserting that as a defense, you would have to prove that as the employer, that the requested accommodation by the employee to espouse their religious belief or practice it or whatever it is, relating to their sincerely held religious belief, that is an undue hardship. And if it's an undue hardship, you can deny it, but that's going to be a pretty tough standard, just like it is with disability. It's really hard to say that you're not going to be able to accommodate somebody with a disability, and why we always get into this interactive process with them, with individuals that are asking for accommodations. We can't just say no. We really want to have an interactive process. We want to engage on this. It's the same with religion. We want to engage with the employee to see what type of accommodations are necessary. What is the belief? What is the issue? Where's the conflict here? And then what can we do as an employer to remedy it? What are you asking of us? Do you need time off for prayer? Do you need to be able a different an exception to the clothing policy, to the dress policy, that would allow you to wear your religious garb or whatever it is. So under Title VII, we can't discriminate, we can't harass, we can't segregate, we can't retaliate against people. We have to provide reasonable accommodations. We cannot deny a reasonable accommodation of somebody who has a religious belief that's protected under Title VII. And the only way we can do it is if we can say that there's an undue hardship that's posed by it. So how does Title VII specifically define a religious belief? All aspects of religious observance and practice, as well as belief. It's not just religion. It's spirituality. It's some sort of belief system. It could just be believed by, like I say, one or two people. It doesn't have to be widely understood. It has to be a sincere, meaningful belief that occupies in the life of the possessor a place parallel to that of filled by God. So something, it could be similar, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be just similar. Moral and ethical beliefs. It doesn't even have to be about right or wrong. Somebody could believe in the destruction of the world or the destruction of people or something like that. I mean, I'm sure they're great at parties, but you don't need to, you probably don't feel necessarily like super safe with them. And if their belief is that they have knives on them, like obviously that would be something you could decline and not allow in the workplace, assuming you don't allow knives in the workplace from other people. But it doesn't even have to be moral. It doesn't even have to be good. It could be some sort of ethos. It could be some sort of that somebody just believes, that somebody just has. You don't get to make the judgment on it. The law is not going to make the judgment on it. So we ask ourselves, is it sincerely held? If it's not sincerely held, then we can decline it. But to get to that, it's hard, right? So if somebody presents this to you and they say, well, I've got this, and just say it's something weird, right? That's me. I'm going to be totally judgy on this, but let's just say it's something you've never heard of before. And you're just like, you're a little skeptical because let's just say, going back to my example of the Sunday work thing, the employee typically works on Sunday, or at least has been available to be scheduled on Sunday, and for weeks or months or maybe even years. And then suddenly they ask for a certain Sunday off because let's just say it's the Super Bowl. And coincidentally, right? So they ask for a Sunday off. Well, you need them to show up for work on Super Bowl Sunday. And so they, suddenly Friday comes around, and they come to you and they're like, well, hey, by the way, I never have brought this up before, but I've got this religious belief that I firmly believe in the religion of the National Football League, and Super Bowl Sunday is a religious event for me. It's like a religion to me. I do some prayers to my football team and the football gods, and I just love football so much and worship the football that's going on. So that's, Super Bowl Sunday is a holiday for me. And so I need that day off. You could ask questions, right? So you could try to get to an understanding of whether or not this is sincerely held. When did you start this? Tell me about your practices. Why this year? You've been scheduled in the past. And if you feel like it's BS, could you decline it? Yes. Is that a potential, taking on a risk and liability for declining somebody who's espousing a religious belief? Yeah, absolutely. You're going to decline somebody asking for a reasonable accommodation and asserting a right under federal law. Doesn't mean you don't do it, but just know that it's going to be difficult, just like it's always difficult whenever you decline somebody who's asking for a reasonable accommodation for a disability. But you could ask some general questions to try to get to the understanding of whether or not this is sincerely held. That's not off limits. You can definitely get into it with the employees. So we want to try to understand sometimes when we're getting into this and we're starting to ask these questions to try to understand the sincerity of the belief and where did it come from, that sort of thing. Sometimes it might be political. Sometimes it might be offensive. Sometimes it might be satirical. So political belief, if it's just a personal preference, it has to be more than a political belief. Political beliefs are not covered by this part of Title VII. So we don't have to accommodate somebody for political beliefs. And it has to be more than just a personal preference. So if you're a member of the Ku Klux Klan, that's not a religion. That's a personal political belief that you don't have to accommodate somebody for that. They're not going to be protected by Title VII if they're members of the Ku Klux Klan. That's not going to hit the definition of a religion. But again, these are tough questions. These are tough questions to ask because, again, we don't want to get into right or wrong on this, because when we're talking about religious discrimination, we don't look at right or wrong. So you might personally have an antagonism against the Ku Klux Klan, but really, you would want to look at this like you would look at any other request for an accommodation. But once you get to the point, you find out that no, this is more of a political view and it's a personal preference. Then then you can say like, oh, that's not religion, and we don't have to accommodate. Offensive behavior. Offensive viewpoints may be a religion. They might not be, but they might be a religion. So we have to figure it out. But again, we're looking for the intersection where there could be a sincerely held religious belief. And offensive behavior is not going to, the offensiveness of the beliefs, the subjective offensiveness of them. That's not something that we can put into the matrix of what we're going to consider when trying to determine whether or not somebody is protected for religion. If it's satire, then again, we're going to ask on this. We're going to try to dive into it a little bit. The NFL, worshiping the NFL, potentially satire, right? So the FSM religion, the flying spaghetti monster religion, sounds fantastic. I'm sure the Google hits on this after this webinar will be out of this world. But if it's satire, then it's not going to be religion. You can decline it. It's not going to be protected by Title VII. But again, we're going to have to ask some questions. We're going to have to get into this. It's going to be difficult. You're going to have to Probably get legal counsel involved, or really look into this, because before you decline somebody, you really want to, and you take on that risk, you really want to make sure that you have a good understanding that it's ultimately okay. Satire is probably the one that's probably the easiest to figure out. Flying Spaghetti Monster, yeah. NFL, worshiping the NFL, probably satire. Although the person might sincerely believe that they are worshiping the NFL, it's I think it's okay at that point to say like, well, you've never worshipped in the past, and it's just coincidental that you're worshiping, the Super Bowl on a day that you're scheduled for work. Okay, so like I had mentioned before, the belief might be religion if it's non-traditional. Doesn't even matter how many people believe in it. Could be one person, could be 5 billion people, or it's probably too many for this planet. But anyway, it could be 1 billion people, and we don't care if it's offensive. It's hard, but we don't care if it's offensive. If it offends somebody else in the workplace, then cross that bridge when you get there. Because that could be potential harassment in the workplace, and that's a whole nother set of things. But when we talk about accommodating somebody, and whether or not they're covered by Title VII, then we're not going to look at we're not going to judge the nature of their religious or their belief system. Okay. So, like I mentioned before, we can't take any adverse actions, which is discrimination. Adverse employment actions. When we talk about discrimination, adverse employment actions are anything that would negatively impact the terms or conditions of the employee's employment. It's the same for all matters of discrimination. If it would negatively impact the terms and conditions of somebody's employment, that's the necessary element to form a basis for discrimination. If ultimately the person never suffers an adverse employment action because of their religious beliefs, then there's no discrimination. So if nothing bad ever happens to them, there's no discrimination. If there's no harassment, there's no hostile work environment, then we don't necessarily I don't want to say that we don't care, but we don't. I mean, it's not going to be unlawful. There's not going to be any discrimination there. Sometimes I say, with ADA, and again, when we talk about accommodations, a lot of this runs parallel. But when it comes to accommodations, if somebody just has a religious belief, a lot of people in the workplace have religious beliefs. I've heard that a lot of people believe in religion in the United States, right? So kind of joking about that. But, a lot do. A good percentage. I don't know what the percentage is, but probably, at least half of the people have some sort of religious belief or system of beliefs. So it's quite a few. So if they're, most people don't need an accommodation, which is great. Then we don't care so much. Great, have your religious beliefs, and we don't need an accommodation. Same with disability. Okay, you've got a disability. Great. Sorry to hear. Good luck to you. Do you need an accommodation in the workplace? No, you're fine. Okay, great. Then no big deal. Same with religion. Like, great, you've got your religious beliefs. They don't impact your ability to do your job. No big deal. And I think that's how it happens for most situations. But there are a number of religions increasing in the work, and especially with the number of Muslims increasing in the U.S. workplace, where because of prayer time, that directly intersects with a lot of a typical work day, full-time work day. So we're seeing a lot more of that, as well as the dress, the garb that certain religions require of their practitioners. Okay, exceptions. Religion could be a bona fide occupational requirement, probably not for many private employers. It could if you're a church or a religious organization. If you're the Catholic Church, you don't have to hire somebody who's Jewish. You don't have to hire a Lutheran. You could legitimately just hire people as a bona fide occupational qualification for the job. Generally, though, if you're going to say that religion's a bona fide occupational qualification, it's a pretty high standard. We talk about this sometimes with regard to race discrimination, more so on the bona fide occupational requirement issue. In the classic example I remember from law school is that, you know, if you're in Hollywood and you're making a movie on the Civil War, and you're looking for the lead for Robert E. Lee, you know, Morgan Freeman might be one of the greatest actors of his generation, but you don't need to consider Morgan Freeman for the role of Robert E. Lee, just because it would be more of a bona fide occupational qualification requirement that Robert E. Lee be Caucasian. And you know, Morgan Freeman, phenomenal actor, you can essentially not consider him for the role. Those are pretty limited circumstances with regard to religion, where you would have to argue that it's a bona fide occupational requirement that the person has such and such religious belief. Pretty tough for most every private employer. But it could be out there, and it is out there as an exception. But the exception is more, typically more along the lines and more geared toward religious organizations and institutions, which have a greater ability to require people of a certain faith that are in line with their mission. Okay, a little bit more complicated. We're going to go on to the accommodation, and again, it's similar to what we see with the ADA. And we're going to start out with the interactive process. So if an employee never brings an issue to you, like I had mentioned a couple of minutes ago, if an employee never brings an issue to you, great, no big deal. You don't have to accommodate them. They need to bring this to you. But once the issue comes to you and you're put on notice, you are put in a place where you need to have this interactive conversation, just like we do with disability, where you want to start conversing with them about how you can potentially accommodate them, whether they're an applicant or a current employee. What can we do? Here is the job. Here's the job. This is what the job requires. These are what our policies require. We require every employee work on weekends. It's part and parcel of the job. You're going to be working full time. You need to work on weekends. We're in retail. We're in hospitality. Whatever it is, we're open on the weekends. We have to work on weekends. It's required of the job. Here's the job description stating as much. So we need to we show the person the job description. We talk about the requirements for the job, and then we start talking about how we can accommodate them. Like what do they need for an accommodation? Can we accommodate whatever their religious belief is? Generally, we want to just ask people the same questions at the interview. We don't want to tailor our questions at the interview because somebody comes in wearing a hijab or some sort of or dreadlocks. We don't want to tailor our questions and suddenly start asking people about their religious beliefs just because they're wearing dreadlocks, right? It's up to the employee to bring that to us. We talk about the job. We talk about the requirements for the job, working on the weekends, wearing this sort of clothing if there's a clothing requirement. And then it's up to the person to say, well, because of my religious beliefs, I can't work maybe Friday night to Saturday. I need to observe the Sabbath. I can't work that. And then rather than just shutting them down, the key for the employer then is to say, oh, okay, well, to engage in a conversation. So explain to me, what's the limitation here? Because this is the job you need to work on Friday nights and Saturdays. So here's the job. And then think about it and engage in the conversation, find out what the employee needs, and then look at the job and see if there's any way to accommodate that. Now, if you're a big company, like let's just say like Target or Walmart, and you get somebody who can't work on Friday night through Saturday night, well, somebody like Target or Walmart can probably accommodate that by switching people around or allowing for shifts to be swapped. Very common thing. Somebody who's a smaller employer or who's got an operation, maybe a small restaurant or something like that with just a few employees, out in the hinterlands, and doesn't have 100 employees at one location and really cannot accommodate that, well, then they might not be able to accommodate it. So we're going to look at the specific circumstances. That's the interactive process. We need to start with this conversation. We start with the employee bringing the information to us. We might want to ask if you want to dive into the sincerity, if it's not clear to you whether it's a sincerely held belief, then you might want to dive into that and get there. But then ultimately, if you find that it seems to be potentially a religious belief, then you move on to, okay, what do you need? And then analyze it against what you require for the job and your specific circumstances. And can you accommodate that that person given what they need? There may be multiple accommodations that are possible. There might be multiple ways that you've identified in your initial part of this interactive process that get you to the point where you're like, oh, I think this could work. Well, at least we could try it out. I think here's an accommodation. So we've got situation 1, we've got situation 2, and situation 3. All 3 of these might be potential accommodations. Okay, great. As an employer, this is the same with the ADA. As an employer, which one does the employee get? Do they get their preference? No, they don't need to get their preference. You as the employer, same with ADA, disability, you get to choose which accommodation. If all 3 potentially work, you get to choose the one that works best for you. If, however, the one that you choose would somehow disadvantage the employee, that could potentially make them not as eligible for compensation, like overtime or promotions, or it would somehow harm them, then you can't choose that one. So if you've got 1, 2, and 3, and number 3 potentially it doesn't lead to as much potential overtime, opportunity, and the employee expresses a desire to work overtime when they can, then you wouldn't want to go with 3. You would want to go with 1 or 2. You get to choose between 1 and 2. But the key here is, and so it's so rare that we have multiple options for accommodations, but the key here is that the employee doesn't get their preferred accommodation request. The employer gets to decide what the accommodation is. A lot of times employees are like, well, I want this, that, and the other. It's like, well, no, not so much. Here, to get to what you need to pray during the workplace, during the workday. You need to take off Sundays every once in a while. Okay, here's what we can do for you. This is what would work for us. And if it's reasonable, if your accommodation is reasonable and it gets to what the employee's need is, then they can't decline it. Then they have to go forward with it. And they can't say that you're discriminating and that you're failing to provide them with an accommodation as required by federal law. Examples of accommodations, there could be, there's no limit, there's no specific, a type of accommodation, but often what we see are schedule changes and modifications to policies. So facial hair, particularly in hospitality, a lot of employers have specific facial hair requirements. They have dress requirements. They have break leave requirements. Now, getting to the bona fide occupational qualification issue, let's just make up an example that I haven't really given a lot of thought to, but let's just say on the dress issue. Okay, if an employee comes to you, let's just say an applicant, and this will be different than the Abercrombie situation that I provided before. And the employee, and let's just say your business is Hooters. Okay, so Hooters has a specific uniform, I believe. So, and that's kind of ubiquitous with the Hooters brand. So if you're Hooters and you require a specific uniform, and that's part and parcel of what you do as a business, then I can imagine that Hooters might be reluctant to say, well, you can wear your religious garb in the workplace. They probably wouldn't want to do that, because then that would mean that they're not wearing the uniform, and the typical uniform that their people wear. So that might be a situation where it's unreasonable, where it's an undue hardship, or it's a bona fide occupational qualification, probably more of a bona fide occupational qualification, that the person wears the uniform, the Hooters uniform. But if you're an office environment, let's just say a law firm or an accounting firm or something like that, some sort of service firm, and somebody wears some sort of dress that's, whatever the requirement is, it doesn't matter, but it's not, a Hooters type of dress, and the person wants to wear, is required by their religion to wear that. Well, you'd be very hard pressed to say that's something that you can't accommodate, and you probably wouldn't even have a dress code policy in the first place, other than say like maybe you have professional clothing that are being worn, but. So that's very different. So we want to understand the business. So when we're looking at these accommodations, we want to understand our business. And a lot of our decision on this, when somebody comes to us with a reasonable accommodation request, a lot of our decision making on this is going to be driven by the qualifications and the requirements for the job. Another reason why we need to have job descriptions, and really well done job descriptions, because we'd be very hard pressed to say to somebody that we cannot accommodate their request for their religious accommodation request, by saying that, well, it's essential for your job that you do this, that, and the other, if it's not in the job description. Another reason why the job descriptions need to be accurate and they need to be updated. The undue hardship is a little bit better than the ADA ones, which requires a significant difficulty or expense. In this one, it's a de minimis expense. So anything more than a de minimis cost to the business, whether it's money or loss of productivity, anything more than a de minimis cost could be an undue hardship. So it's, in that regard, it's better than the disability, than the ADA, because if it's something that's a little bit expensive, more than de minimis, or a little bit more costly to your operation, then you could actually claim it as an undue hardship. It's always very difficult to claim an undue hardship in these sorts of, against these federal laws, but religious discrimination gives you a little bit better opportunity to do so. I do want to point out, as you can see from the note here, that if you're thinking like, oh, coworkers are going to be upset that the person is wearing this, that, and the other, or has dreadlocks or something, coworkers are going to be upset about it, then that's not an undue hardship. You don't get to project the potential or the real coworker disgruntlement with somebody who's professing their religious belief as an undue hardship. Same with customers. That's probably where Abercrombie, I'm guessing, was getting a lot of, they wanted the Abercrombie look, right? Well, the Abercrombie look doesn't have a hijab, and maybe now it's becoming to, because I think they're probably changing. They probably are being forced to change, but the typical Abercrombie look is East Coast Ivy League. It's not hijab, and so they had the look policy, right? And the look policy corresponded to what they were selling, and what they're selling are clothing along those lines, and so they would want their employees to reflect that clothing. But the Supreme Court made it very clear that that's not how Title VII works, Abercrombie. So you don't get to do that. But I'm sure Abercrombie argued, or wanted to argue, if they didn't, that look, our customers aren't going to like that. Our customers are going to feel out of place with somebody who's wearing a hijab in the workplace, in our stores, but you don't get to argue the customer's preference. In fact, the EOC, it's kind of comical actually. The EOC, in some of their guidance to employers, talks about how employers should go and educate their customers on religious clothing and stuff like that, like as if your managers should take your customers aside and give them a stern lecture about being more open to religious beliefs. So I get it. I mean, but it's pretty Pollyanna ish. But hey, there's EOC for you. you also cannot claim as an undue hardship that a bunch of employees are going to probably need this accommodation. This comes up a lot with the fear that if one employee asks for time off to pray during the workday, that like all the employees are going to ask for time to pray during the workday. You actually have to take it as an individual request, and you can't say like, oh no, we can't accommodate that because, oh my gosh, it's going to open the floodgates and everybody's going to ask for this accommodation to pray during the workday. You can't, and that's, I get it. Like if I were making decisions for a business and I had one person, I'd be completely concerned about the floodgates opening up and this being a potential issue. But the way that EOC looks at Title VII, you don't get to make that argument, or that argument doesn't hold water, or if I'm one of my Dallas partners, that dog don't hunt argument, I guess. So you don't get to make it. It's not going to work for you. Okay, let's talk about. So I see people have asked some questions, and I think just very quickly glancing at these questions, I think some of them are going to be covered here. But if I don't get all the questions, we'll type them up and send them around, send responses to people. So I do thank you for the questions. Okay. The Festivus is the belief in Festivus for the rest of us. Okay, so that's straight out of Seinfeld. Okay, so here's what it includes: the Festivus dinner, the aluminum pole, airing of the grievances, the feast of strength, and the Festivus miracles. And seriously, it's like 2 or 3 minutes on YouTube. It's quite funny. Okay, so you have an employee named Chris. Congratulations. You have an employee. Okay, Chris Wood decided to celebrate Festivus this year. Congratulations, Chris, new convert to Festivus. Chris shows up to work on December 23rd, and in Festivus tradition, started to air his grievances with all members of management. And so airing of the grievances is where you literally like start calling out people. It's a super Minnesotan tradition. So clearly Seinfeld's from New York. This would not go over well in Minnesota, where, nobody like says what they feel. But airing of grievances. So Chris just starts going around to each member of management and saying, in Festivus tradition, I'm going to tell you that you're an SOB and your management style is terrible and all of us hate you. And anyway, just start calling out management. Okay, so is this a religion or a religious belief? What would be the best steps in handling this situation? Can you accommodate Chris? And so I think it's fair to ask, so if Chris brings this to you and he's like, hey, Festivus, and he brings in his aluminum pole and he puts it in his cubicle and he's like, this year I'm celebrating Festivus. Well, I think, and then, as employees typically are not want to do, doesn't bother to ask if he can go around and start calling out management and airing his grievances. But obviously you stop him after the first, executive wants to tear his head off, and you ask him what's going on as an HR person. It'd be fair for you and allowed under Title VII for you to start asking Chris about Festivus. Tell me about Festivus, Chris. It's the belief in Festivus for the rest of us. Okay. Like what does it include? Okay. It's a Festivus dinner. That sounds right. Okay. Aluminum pole. Okay. It's different, but there it is. Airing of grievances. Okay. So we've got a feast of strength, feats of miracles. So we've got, things that sound like religious observance and it sounds like a kind of a different type of religion. So we could maybe allow that. Though I think you could ask Chris, like, when did you come to this? Oh, like last week you came to this after your performance review where you got really bad marks. Okay, you could maybe stop Chris at that. You might feel that this is not sincere. It would certainly be satirical, since Festivus is a widely recognized satirical holiday that derives from Seinfeld. So I think you could probably put a stop to Chris and maybe send him home for the day after he aired his grievances with one manager. I think you could do that. If you feel that, let's just say that you feel like, oh my gosh, well, I don't want to get too judgy on Festivus. Okay, maybe he's legit in it. He's come around to this. But airing the grievances. Does he get to air the grievances by going around to management? Not so much. At that point, the observance of his faith, the observance of Chris's faith is going to interact negatively with his coworkers. And it's that point where you can put a stop to it. If you're religious, let's just say you have a religious belief where you want to take a fish and hit people over the head with it, okay? Just because, let's just say it's sincere. Like you truly believe in some Monty Python skit of taking a fish and hitting people over the head with it. And, so you wouldn't allow that in the workplace. You wouldn't allow other people to come and take a fish or anything and hit people over the head with it. You probably don't allow people to go and start cussing out managers without repercussions, open door policy and all, but depending on what they're saying, it might be highly inappropriate. But you don't have to give him access to those managers to air the grievances because his religious belief, even if it is sincere, is coming completely in contrast and friction against other people and the workplace policies. So could you put a stop, even if it is legitimate? Could you put a stop to Chris going around and airing his grievances? Yes. Assuming that you, or somebody going around hitting other people with fish? Yes. Assuming that you have policies and practices of just generally not allowing people to go around and chewing out their coworkers or managers here. Could you accommodate Chris? Sure, you could, if you believe that it's sincere, you could say, Chris, you could say, Chris, why don't you air your grievances by sending an email of your beliefs to the managers. Why don't you do that? And by the way, you don't have to accommodate if he gets personally, he gets mean and he gets harassing or discriminatory. You don't have to put up with it. Like, could you discipline or even terminate Chris for violating your own other harassment policies? Yeah, just because he has a sincerely held religious belief doesn't mean that you have to excuse other rules. Somebody who has the fish belief and they come and they just smack a coworker with a fish in the head and they say, Mary, Fishmas or whatever. And, would you have to allow for that? Could you discipline the person? Absolutely. You probably have a policy or at least a practice of not allowing violence in the workplace. So you would not have to accommodate that, and you could discipline, maybe terminate that person for smacking a coworker with a fish, if you would otherwise terminate people for doing similar stuff. You have an employee. So this is beardoism. You have an employee, which is the belief that you should never shave your beard. You have an employee named Ben who has been working for you for the last 10 years. You have a strict no facial hair policy. This morning, he walks in after vacation with a full beard and claims he can't shave it for religious purposes. What are your next steps? So again, Ben's been a coworker. It's not like a new applicant here. Ben's been a coworker for an employee of yours for 10 years. Could you at that point say, what happened during vacation? Tell me about your religion. Could you ask questions about that? Yes. Should you start to get start making value judgments or imposing your subjectivity on Ben and how he came to this or what his religious beliefs are? No. You shouldn't be doing that. But could you ask how he got to it? Should you get an understanding of his beliefs and what you might, so that you can go to the next step, which is then to understand whether, if and how you could accommodate Ben? Absolutely. That's part of the interactive process. He is asking for an accommodation of your policy, so that he can observe his religion, beardoism. And so you can try to figure out if it's sincere. If it is sincere, you get to that point, then you could say, okay, you need to wear a beard. Our policy is cleanly shaven. Then you need to get to the understanding, what is your policy? Just like Abercrombie had to get to their policy of their look policy. Okay, was their look potentially discriminatory? Was it discriminating against Muslims who wanted to wear hijabs? Yes. what is your policy? Why is your policy that somebody needs to be cleanly shaven? Is it because your customers will react? Are you a bank? Do you believe the customers that come up to you and like at the teller or whatever are going to be more receptive to somebody who is cleanly shaven? Well, that doesn't get to drive it. Is it because you're a food processing place and beards are unsanitary? Is it because then that would be different? That would be entirely different. That might impose an undue hardship. It might the facial hair might even violate various licensing or other laws that are unique to your industry. That's entirely different, right? Than just we like it when people look cleanly shaven. Our customers like it when people look cleanly shaven. We want to express a certain look. We want to look this certain way. Well, that doesn't play today. That's going to be potentially unlawful. If it is because we have rules, because we have laws, it's a sanitary issue, we're doing food, whatever it is, and there's some rules or some licensing issues that you either can't have facial hair, that you have to cover your hair, your head hair, then that's a totally different situation. You might not be able to accommodate Ben and beardoism. You might not be able to if your company has a requirement that there's a reason that's justifying this policy. But if it's just because of customers and because you just like a certain look and you believe that people are more professional when they don't have beards, it's not going to hold water. That dog's not going to hunt if you make that argument. And so, you're going to have to really look at the circumstances. But again, the key for us, the steps that we take, we're talking about the interactive process. We're looking into this. We're trying to figure out his understanding, his beliefs. We're trying to understand what the restrictions are. And then we have to understand our job and we have to understand our company to make a determination as to whether or not we can accommodate Ben and his hair. Similar with facial piercings, the Church of Body Modification. So your company has an appearance policy that restricts facial piercings. You recently hired an employee who claims she's part of the Church of Body Modifications and must have facial piercings as part of her belief. Your normal practice is to have employees cover up piercings with Band-Aids. The new employee refuses as it restricts her practice. Next steps? Can you ask to determine the sincerity of her beliefs? Yes. Can't get too deep into it again, right? We can't make our own personal judgments on it. But once you understand, and if you get to the point where you believe that these are religious beliefs for her, then what is that religion? What is professing her faith on her face? What does it require of her? Well, if it requires that she show her piercings, assuming that they're not offensive to other people, because again, you still have offensiveness policies that could restrict this, but let's just say they're normal, typical loop earrings or something like that, and they're not offensive to anybody. Could you, ask yourself, given your business, could you restrict her from wearing them? And the answer might be no. Let's just say you're a restaurant. A lot of restaurants have policies that restrict people from facial rings and other piercings. So if you have a policy like that, what you would have to do if it's assuming you could, you probably could as a restaurant, could you make an exception to your policy for somebody who's professing her faith through these piercings? And the answer is yes, you're required to by law. And what if the coworkers complain? They're like, well, we've got piercings. Why do we have to take them off? Why do we have to cover them up with Band-Aids? That doesn't play into the calculus that you have to make in determining whether or not to accommodate this person who is a member of the Church of Body Modifications. Everybody else who just likes piercings and doesn't want to cover them up, that's different. Those are just typical people. We see the same type of stuff with ADA accommodations. It's different. The person who has a religious belief is protected by law. The person who just likes their piercings because they're cool isn't protected by law. And so we can accommodate one without opening up the floodgates and creating a slippery slope, unless you're going to get a bunch of new practitioners for the Church of Body Modifications. Okay, last one. Fasting for Ramadan. Your receptionist asked permission to be absent for Ramadan, an Islamic holiday. Her manager decided it would be hardship as no one is trained for her position. Was this the correct way to handle it? She came into work and seems very weak and faint from the fasting. Her manager reprimands her for not being able to focus. I think that's going to be a problem, right? You need to, again, when we're looking at accommodations, you need to understand the requirements for the job. You need to understand if you can reasonably accommodate her. It's going to be difficult if somebody's asking for permission. Now, and I'm so sorry, I don't remember how long Ramadan goes. I know it goes for a while, but you will likely allow other, let's just say your situation is that you allow other people time off for vacations, for unpaid leaves of absence, other reasons that you give people blocks of time off. You would be hard pressed in that situation to decline somebody who's asking for it when it's for religious reasons. So if you're going to treat them differently, you're going to be running into trouble. And then reprimanding her for coming in and not being able to focus. If for whatever reason you cannot accommodate her and she comes in and she's not able to do her job, then yes, potentially you could, I mean, it's slippery slope. It's really difficult, but you could potentially look at disciplining her. I don't highly recommend it, but more likely than not, you're going to have to accommodate her on the front end by letting her take time off, because it's the rare employer who doesn't give anybody time off for other non-protected reasons. Okay, So anyway, we had a couple examples that we didn't get to, but our time's up. It was a really good, fun topic. This is recorded. If anybody wants to listen to it again, you're welcome to find it at the ACCOMMODATION spaghetti one website, myHRgenius.com. I appreciate your attention, and next month we will be talking about our 2019 series, which is we're going to start out with looking back at 2018 and then looking forward to what to expect from 2019. We've got divided government in many states, but also at the federal level now, and we'll start to see if what changes the EOC and the Department of Labor and the NLRB are going to be able to make now that the Trump administration has been in power for over 2 years. We should start to see a lot of regulations start to make their way through, and maybe some changes on HR. So we'll talk about that next month. But in the meantime, happy Festivus to everybody, and I appreciate your attention, and I will talk to you next month.